David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm today in studio with Mike Herzog, our engineer. How's it going, Mike?
Doing great. I mean, been called a lot of things in my life, and I'll take engineer.
Yeah.
Some circles, that's not a
well, you're a PE, so it's
There
not
you go.
phys ed, right? It's not physical education.
Yeah, that's something like that. Something like that.
You know, it's funny. I do this a few days a week, and sometimes, I do the same introduction, and sometimes it comes off kind of crazy. And I sometimes just come on and it's like, what did I say again? Yeah. So
it's good. I like it. It's
yeah.
PE is professional engineer, so I'm licensed.
No, I knew what it stood for.
It's my title. I'm good. The extent of my physical education or activity is getting my butt up out of a chair and grabbing coffee. So I'm not a field guy at all. I'm in the office.
You know, we were talking about something. It's funny. A lot of people think EVs are only for people who are running around commuting in town. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, well, we're out in Omaha, but Omaha is a city, if you want to call it that. We're not as big as big cities, but we're not a village either. Anyways, but a lot of Nebraska is pretty rural. And when you start going a little further west into Wyoming and Utah, you got people who live on farms and ranches that are an hour or more from the nearest gas station. You see signs on the interstate that say, hey, get gas, last chance to get gas for the next 120 miles and things like that. I mean, you could be living a long ways. And what we see is these big, F-250 pickup trucks that have an extra gas tank sitting in the bed of the truck because they have to go, drive when they need gas for 2 hours round trip or more just to get fuel. And what's funny is they wouldn't consider an electric vehicle, but an electric truck, they could charge at home all the time. And it's a strange way that people think, because if I were a farmer and I had an electric F-150, I could be plugging it in whenever I need to. I could run it all around town and out in the country where I live, never have to worry about that stupid trip, every week or so to go buy gas.
Yeah, the mileage and range on those, I mean, it fits your needs and what you're doing, and if the towing capability, you're not going that far necessarily, like it all works out. It's interesting because when you look at this from a pure financial, economic standpoint, is, do I make money? Do I save money? How do all of these things work? We, just like you said, we factor a lot of that in for metro considerations. There's not space. I only have so much room for solar. I only have so much space to put this in. What's my daily commute look like? How am I going to crunch that out? Well, a lot of those factors start to turn over when you get in rural spaces, where you talk about reliability of power and charging and everything like that. No, it's not great in rural areas, just because the exposure in miles and miles of line and aging facilities and XYZ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you have space for renewables. You have space for diesel generation. You have space for all of these things out there that are cheap and plentiful, and you can get over that resiliency hurdle. And all of a sudden that makes economic sense. Then charging a battery makes economic sense in these spaces. So a lot of these metrics and equations we've put on, should we be incorporating these more? Where's that tip over point for a business? It works better in some of these applications, definitely.
Well, I suspect if I were that rancher, my argument would be that I have to go to the grocery store in that town, anyways. But at the same time, that's the EV argument about owning one, because all of the superchargers are located at grocery stores, or most of them, at least the ones for Tesla. They put them all at grocery stores. And so, I mean, it's simple. It's like, well, you go charge when you go to the grocery store. It's a pretty simple concept, but it's exactly the same thing. And they're out there in the wilderness, and they've been doing this for, as long as there's been cars. And it's just kind of a, funny reversal of the technology, because they would be better suited to be electric.
I don't want to overgeneralize, but farmers and ranchers are people that value their independence and what they do, and they want to own and create and manage what they do. They're very, very shrewd business people, and understand the value of money and payback periods, and make the decisions on their operations based off of that. So when you start to put those things together, it's like you can generate your own power. I'm surprised it's just not more appealing out there. You have complete control. You can put these things together. You own it. You operate it. You decide when it turns on and off, when you charge, how you charge, all of those things. So I think maybe it just hasn't penetrated, out there yet, and thinking about it, and some of these dots haven't been connected. But I agree with you. It's just one of those, you don't think about it a lot, but when you take a step back and actually do, and look at the whole picture, I think that kind of makes sense for a lot of those applications.
I'm just saying, because what those farmers are doing is, which people are resistant to, is exactly kind of the argument of why, now when I say this for EV people, this should be EV people that live in apartments and don't have access to charging at home, right? It's exactly the same argument. You'd have the same issue. That now, of course, I'm going to be honest, I don't know, I wouldn't want to be out there living remotely like all of these farmers. Maybe at a different time I could see living, outside of town on a few acres. Okay, I can see that, but I really don't want to be hours and hours from civilization and all that. But that's a different story. Let's move on to one of the more humorous thing that's kind of going on right now, and that is, we had a news a couple of weeks ago that was kind of shocking, that Tesla laid off the entire supercharging team. Well, they have, and this was kind of odd, because part of Biden's policies, he's trying to show that we're growing the infrastructure, and all of us, and but whenever he talks about EVs, he always leaves out Tesla. He'll never praise Tesla in any way. It's really hard to fathom when they're, a big US automaker, and they pay better than the unions, and they're refusing to unionize.
You and I were looking at some numbers a week or two ago, and every single graph, every single one was asterisks except for Tesla. And it was, I think it was meant to illustrate how poorly EVs were performing and sitting on the lots and weren't selling. It was, except Tesla.
Except Tesla, we're leaving Tesla out here. Right. Yeah. And, some of that gets silly. And some people think that this may have actually been a political move by Elon. There's some theories like he did it just to piss off the Biden administration. But I somehow doubt that was really why he would have done this. Although you never really know, because Elon is a bit of a troll.
Yes. A little knee-jerky sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. So it looks like Elon may be hitting a reverse on this. So they laid off about 500 employees, including the head. And Max DeZegger, and I don't know if I'm really pronouncing that right, director of North American Charging, and one of the managers under the previous leader, Rebecca Tanucci, was among those rehired. They haven't announced how many people they've brought back already, but they've already gone back and rehired a whole bunch of these folks. And that's really surprising. It's surprising, not surprising. I don't know. It's really kind of a knee-jerk reaction, it seems.
Corporate strategies and cleanup items where it's you make people reapply for their jobs, and you figure out who you want to keep and who can do it again. It doesn't necessarily sound like that. I mean, that's a big business decision to announce. We're removing people and kind of suspending a major tenet of our operation, but it could also be one of those where it's just, hey, light the fire under a couple of people, keep people on their toes, understand what's happening. Like we're going to do this, but prove to us why you want this job and why you can still do this job.
Well, I mean, you look at what he did at Twitter, and he came in and he asked everybody to submit what it was they were doing at the company or something like that. And he let 80% of the employees go, 80%. And it's shocking, but apparently they were bleeding out, and that was the only way they could stop the bleeding. And I don't know if he's made a reversal there or not, but I suspect he has. We don't know anymore because it's
Yeah.
private, but it was interesting. And last week, Musk also announced more than a $500 million investment to expand the Supercharger network. He says the funds will be used for new sites and expansions, including thousands of new chargers. Now, a lot of the chargers are this older version 2 or 3, and they have a version 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a matter of kind of getting a lot of those replaced, but it just seems
a lot of ups and
crazy.
downs over the past couple of weeks if you're looking at the Tesla charging arm.
Yeah, well, it's the rehiring thing is a little nuts because I found lots of articles on the topic, but they're pretty much all the same 2 paragraphs of information. So there really wasn't a huge influx of information on there. All right, we talked last week about California and how they were able to run on 100% renewables for what was it, like 8-9 straight days, and they actually did it for like 43 out of 45 straight days. Well, Newsom's talking here on something on a similar topic. They've just surpassed 10 gigawatts of storage on batteries.
Wow.
And well, how many homes? Do you have any idea how much that would represent in terms of?
Ooh, you make me do my math. So a megawatt, which there's 1,000 megawatts in a gigawatt. Depending on where you're at, AC, everything like that. Let's say it's, for easy math, say it's 200 people. 100 to 200 people, homes where you're at.
A megawatt supports 200 homes.
Yeah, if you're not running ACs, if you're running heavy ACs, it's going to be less than that if they're bigger homes. So let's just say 200 homes. That's very generous on the number side, but it's easier for the math. So 1 gigawatt would be 200 times 1,000.
200,000.
200,000. So
yeah. So this would be 2 million homes at one time. Now, and 2 million homes. Now, if you took the population of California being around 30 million and divided that by 4, you probably have about 7.5 million homes. So this thing, in theory, could support up to about a quarter of the population, probably. Yeah, that's pretty significant.
For napkin math, I don't think that number's too crazy.
So currently in California, as I've learned from a lot of our listeners, a lot of the power comes from they sell solar to the Pacific Northwest during the day, and they pull back hydroelectric from the Pacific Northwest at night.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that it's a nice trade-off. And so it's kind of interesting to see they export. California is already exporting a lot of solar to the neighboring states, and they're importing other power, mostly that hydroelectric at night. And California's been on a big push to become its own energy independent state, and they seem to be well on their way there. The challenge is always time, and it's funny because green energy to you and I doesn't seem like a political issue. I'm not a huge Newsom fan, okay? So he's done some good things, but for the most part, I think a lot of his ideas are, of course, this is any politician, right? Is grandstanding, and I think that they're going to be able to make. California's already hit 25% of new car sales are EVs, so it doesn't seem unrealistic that by 2030 they could be all plug-in hybrid or electric vehicle sales. Okay, on the cars, SUVs, passenger vehicles.
Yeah.
They're trying to do stuff in the trucking space. The challenge to me is, there are electric trucks, okay? And when I say electric trucks, I mean like semi trucks. But so the cost difference between if you had a Peterbilt that was a basic 18-wheeler, nice, where you can sleep in it and all that, it's probably $120,000 for a diesel. Okay, but a comparable electric truck's probably $360,000. Okay, now if you're an independent driver, is that really fair to tell you you've got to all of a sudden go out and lay out $300-something thousand? Now, is it going to be cheaper to operate? A little.
A
Okay,
little,
so
but you're not making that up over the lifetime of that vehicle.
well, I don't know. I mean, people
Really?
typically drive those 1,000,000 miles.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it's not the same as driving a passenger car. They'll drive those
That's true.
vehicles, and they'll keep overhauling the engines and all that. So there's a lot more on that chassis that's expected.
Mhm.
But what would be the battery life on one of those? I already know that on the Tesla long ranges, people are from 2020 onward, they're hitting 300,000 miles without replacing the
Without
battery
having to replace it?
frequently. Yeah, so you're looking at basically what would be equivalent, considered to be a 30-year battery on a.
Mhm.
But when you start talking about that on a semi, you would hit 300,000 miles in
Quick.
3
Yeah.
years. Okay, because most drivers drive about 100,000 miles a year. So they drive 2,000 miles a week. Just figure 100,000 miles a year. At what point are you then having to replace? Now that battery pack is the big expense, but you and I know that in 3 years that battery pack probably have gone down $100,000.
Mhm.
Okay, but that's the price of another Peterbilt.
Yeah, you could
Okay,
have fully replaced.
yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so while I'd love to see improvements, and I see improvements in hybrid technology. Well,
Mhm.
here's the other thing. Okay, so realistically, you're only going to save about 50% of your fuel cost by doing electric, going from diesel. And the reason for that is because the extra weight of the vehicle
Mhm.
and the fact that the electricity, when they're buying it, is going to be at not just supercharger. It's these extra, chargers that are already being put in place, but it's going to be pricier than residential electric by far. It's at least double.
That's the way rates are structured. I mean, it's you have a demand charge, if you're going to go up that high.
Yeah. I've seen arguments that the savings is really only about 20 to 25%.
Wow.
Okay, between diesel and electric. And there's other technologies out there that, because I told you I've been consulting for a company that might be able to make diesel be twice as efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you did that, you'd have basically the same carbon emissions cut.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not completely sure that all of these things are sane in the state of California. I think there's going to be other things out there. I mean, I love what Tesla's doing with their trucks, and they're using them out there with Pepsi.
And it also opens the question: are people going to be able to operate, diesel vehicles in California? Which I'm going to guess they have to. So then, are you actually shooting yourself in the foot? Because I'm just going to go register this in Nevada, and that's where my home operation all of a sudden is, because now I can have this this ICE vehicle, still this diesel truck, and operate it in the state of California as long as it's registered somewhere else. I
don't know where this is played out, but I've seen in the past arguments about an 18-wheeler. So like Arkansas has kind of low gas prices. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will top off at the last gas diesel station in Arkansas before they cross the neighboring states like Texas or Tennessee or somebody like that. Yep. And so what happens is those states, Tennessee and Texas, aren't collecting taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because those trucks are bypassing the more expensive states. Not that Tennessee is crazy expensive, and I don't think Texas probably is either. But I'm just saying that when you're driving and that gas bill is coming out of your own pocket, you typically will do things that try to maximize that.
And if you're driving the same route and you know where those gas stations are, and you can make it, if I fill up here and do this, like why wouldn't you do that? We have the same thing here. It used to be more pronounced, but the difference in gasoline, unleaded gasoline between Nebraska and Iowa, because Texas was huge. It was 25% or something like that. So for a minute there, you'd even have people drive across the border, go fill up in Iowa, and come back, because it took me a little bit of time, but it saved me a whole bunch of money.
Well, Missouri's even cheaper.
Yeah.
Missouri, I used to drive through the state of Missouri a lot, and there's certain towns always were cheaper than the rest of the state, but it was cheaper than Illinois, Arkansas, Tennessee, or Iowa, or Nebraska. and it was always quite a bit cheaper.
Side anecdote on filling up like that. There's a gas station or truck stop in Nebraska that just, I'm not going to name names, just kills it. Top performer, national brand, all the way out there along one of our busy highways. It's because they're 2 miles down the road from a way station. So you have trucks come in running on fumes, so their trucks make weight because they're not carrying that gasoline, and then know they can go fill up right over there, which kind of defeats the purpose of like, well, yeah, you're close to the border of Nebraska. We don't want these heavy trucks on a road. Like,
make the weight.
I made it, and then they go fill up 2 miles down the road, and it is.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no idea that was a thing. Man, that's really min-maxing your trucking business.
And my understanding is they knew where they put it, and they put it there for a reason, and it just makes a killing because everybody knows that it's sitting there waiting, and you don't fill up until you've got your weight checked.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I see people arguing about these different topics with the trucks and stuff, and it's like, you guys haven't really thought some of this through. I mean, I see where, it's funny because the people who want to argue and talk about how bad EVs are don't realize how good the EVs really are. But the real problem is the fact that they're really not saving as much money as I think compared to the enormous cost of it. That's why I saw I commented on LinkedIn yesterday when Greenland Tech was talking about some of their vehicles, and they make heavy equipment. Mm-hmm. Okay, they make the front end loaders, and the fact that their front end loaders as electric have the same price tag as the diesel versions, which in the trucking business, it's not even remotely close.
No.
And there are big tax breaks for buying that $360,000 electric truck. Okay. But they don't bring it down to the $120,000 price. And that's the challenge there is what is going to fill in there? Are you going to have a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle? Are you going to have an all-electric vehicle? I see at the moment the tech in the all-electric vehicle stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like Tesla's got them running around. Pepsi is running them, but where Pepsi's charging them all in their own facilities. So by charging them in their own facilities, they're cutting down on that electric cost. So they really are, because they're getting the savings.
Meter, so it's
right.
It's bundled in with everything. Okay.
Right. So they're not paying what you would pay if, let's say, you were at a Flying J and Flying J had the mega superchargers.
Yeah, they have to make their cut. They have to do their business.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is Pepsi's able to do it without the markup, and Volvo is about to unleash less expensive electric trucks in California than what the Tesla's running at Pepsi, but everything is still sort of prototypes. Mm-hmm. They're running them. They're trying to get more real world experience, but once again, they're charging them on their own chargers. The economics don't work the same when you start going at long routes.
100%. It was a previous guest you had on here before from Dodonda Analytics, and his comment that stuck with me was, it's the issue with EVs. It's not the journey there, it's the way back. Everybody can charge at home, everybody can charge at their main facility, whatever that is, and go somewhere. How do you get the charge to come back to maximize that mileage? And I think that's what the case is. Sure, if Pepsi, you have a route, going to another facility, you're doing that. That's great. It's going to work. But when you're out in the wild and you don't know where you're going to charge, that's when that breaks down.
And folks, I apologize. I had to put a cough drop in. I've got a little dry cough going, so I'm not chewing gum. I had somebody point it out one time when I had a cough a few months ago. Oh, I'm trying to mute myself. Right. Well, that's what people had to comment about the video was I was chewing gum. It's like, well, no, I wasn't. Anyways, but let's talk about tariffs. So tariffs are a big thing right now that just all of a sudden come up. The Biden administration has announced a plan to put 100% tariffs on Chinese-made
Yep.
EVs. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, it's funny they're calling the Seagull out. I mean, to me, that's the one. That's the one that's going to do it. At that
So
price point, its effectiveness. I mean, that's tough.
So they're able to sell this for below $9,000, right at about $9,000 in China. Now they have an upgraded version that sells for $12,000, but you know, they're not planning on selling it here, but they're going to sell it in Mexico. And like you said, after you came from a vacation, or was it Costa Rica? You saw
Costa Rica,
Seagull?
some for sale. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh, you actually saw them for sale.
Yeah, some for sale.
Okay, I thought maybe you just saw one driving around. You actually saw them for sale
They
too.
were on the dealer lot. Yep.
Was it an actual BYD dealer then?
No, they had a handful of them. I forget who it was. I don't think it was a dedicated BYD. I mean, it was it was a hodgepodge on the lot at the time, at least.
Okay.
Maybe it was. I don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention, I suppose.
Let's see what we got here. Any car company is not paying attention to them as a competitor is going to be lost when they hit their market, said Sam Fiorana, Vice President, Auto Forecast Solutions. BYD's entry into the U.S. market isn't an if, it's a when. You know, I suspect they're either going to start manufacturing in the United States or, you know, they'll do something to make it work, because we already know that Volvo is about to release the EX30 for $35,000 in the United States, and it's going to be predominantly a Geely, which is a Chinese brand, made product, and Geely owns most of Volvo cars.
I don't know.
I think Geely owns a couple of the European brands, I think. Anyways, but because Volvo exports from the United States, there's some way that they're able to get around some of the rules, and it goes back to something that I think has existed in the United States since the 1800s. That gives them the way they're able to do this.
Basically, because they go out, they opened up a tunnel, and now they can use that to come back in.
Yeah, so they're able to skirt that, but there's going to be a $35,000 Model Y competitor in the U.S. made by Volvo. Volvo is considered to be more of a quality automaker or luxury automaker, and the word Volvo, yeah, if you were going to do one of those things on different, what's the one word? I'm going to say Mercedes. You say pricey. Volvo, you're going to say what?
Unreliable.
Well, I was going to say safety.
Safety. Okay.
Did you say unreliable?
Well, it's people I've known who have owned Volvos. And this is maybe just my personal spin on it. It seems like they're always in the shop, and always. I had to order this damn part from, overseas, and this
from
and
Sweden.
and this is how expensive it was, and the labor, and it's just one of those. It's interesting, those personal perspectives, because I think like, in my mind, like the issues they've had with maintenance and reliability and everything, now they're changing it and adding electric to a space that's a little, still finding its footing in some cases and figuring out maintenance plans and everything. But it's interesting. Yeah.
So this article talks about the new automotive Cold War between the United States and China, and as a result of the 100% tariff. But two things of note in the electric vehicle world happened today around the same time. Geely Group owned Chinese. My dogs got really excited about this. Chinese EV brand Zeekr debuted on the New York Stock Exchange at a valuation of around $5.2 billion. Now, so once again, that Geely owns the Volvo cars and Zeekr. And then 250 miles south in DC, news emerged the Biden administration is set to quadruple tariffs on Chinese-made EVs if they hit American roads. And that is, a pretty big deal. I think, but Zeekr is kind of a luxury brand in the Chinese market.
Okay. That's It's a very good juxtaposition between private industry and government right there. And you have private industry going like, I think this is the way we're going, and our federal government trying to halt that as much as they can.
Well, you've heard me say this before. I'm not a huge. Some days I'm a fan of the big three here in the U.S., but I think as a country, we really have four big automakers. We have the traditional Ford, Chrysler, and GM, and the Chrysler is now Stellantis. But you have Tesla. You have Tesla as well. Okay, and people don't even really think about Tesla. They still think about Ford, GM. People don't even realize that Tesla is an American-made car, the most American-made car at that. And the other companies import far more of the price. Tesla actually manufactures more of their parts in the United States than any of the other makers. And they have the best-selling car in the world in the Model Y, which is also the safest car in the world. But what I'm getting at is I'd like to see U.S. automakers be protected. 100% tariff on Chinese automakers makes sense. We already have the chicken tax on Chinese trucks, or not Chinese trucks, on imported foreign trucks. That's about 27%. And that's a big part. That's already existed. But then we have a 25% tax on Chinese imports of pretty much, I think it's pretty much anything. Yeah. And so the 100% one, I think, is good for the U.S. automakers. Our automakers need some space to get some kind of foothold in the EV space. Ford, I see really working at it. GM, we were talking about the thing with the trucks out remotely. GM has brought a couple of trucks, the second truck to market now, that they both have 400-mile ranges. And the GM trucks don't lose as much range when they tow.
That's nice. I mean, that's a huge component of it, especially for that type of application where you own a 250 or a 350 if you're a Ford person, because you are actually using it, because you need that towing capability. Right.
Well, I saw a contest between the three big, or it was four trucks. It was the Tesla truck, Rivian truck, GM, and Ford electric trucks on towing, and GM won by a wide margin.
Really?
In that space. Yeah, and I'm not really seeing people really talk about this too much, but really this applies to people who tow a boat, or they are going to use it. In my opinion, the GM is superior for somebody who's going to be in the contracting business, has to tow a trailer full of tools to job sites. It definitely is something better in that regard. All right, so our last topic for today is grid connection backlog. And I don't know if you have seen this article.
I live in that world every day.
I know you do. But the backlog of green energy to go onto the grid had an increase of a 30% growth of backlog, and dominated by solar, wind, and energy storage wanting to get connected. There's 2,600 gigawatts of energy ready to go onto the grid. Then, based on the numbers we were talking about earlier, what was it? A gigawatt represented 200,000 homes?
Let's call it something like that. 100 to 2,000, depending on where you're at. Yeah. That's a lot of power.
Yeah. So, that support a lot of homes. So we were talking about what a big deal it was for California to have 10 gigawatts of storage. Well, here's 2,600 gigawatts of power, and the grid's not ready to accept it yet. Now, my understanding is a lot of this is bureaucracy, but you have to lay transmission lines. Yeah. All that. What are your thoughts on this, Mike?
Yeah, this is a big one. This is a huge one, and I'm going to forget the federal agency, but I think it was Department of Energy just issued guidelines and a fairly substantial report on how they can start to address this at a national level, because it is such an issue. So the interconnection process, as it looks, detailed engineering study, and because it's a grid, because everything's interconnected, you have to study its impact on everything. So if we put something here in Nebraska, effectively, we need to say, well, what's going to happen in Missouri? What's going to happen in Kansas and Oklahoma and Iowa and the Dakotas and all the states around us? We have to study its impact and understand what that looks like. So it's created this situation where we have detailed technical engineering studies that have to happen. And the problem is, like, it's like the grid, we weren't built for it. When you used to do this and you added a power plant, a coal power plant, a nuclear power plant, something big, it didn't happen very often. You
Right.
would build one, you'd identify the need. I need this in 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. I'm going to build it. And you know what? I'm going to build it real big so I don't have to build another one anytime after that. So you'd end up, in a geographic footprint like the Midwest or the East Coast, you'd put a couple of these on a year, and it was a major, major capital investment that somebody said, like, I have to do this. I'm going to put it in. This is the spot. It's by a river. It's by a railroad, whatever that might be, to get coal there. So you were locked into that. Well, what happened is you got all of these wind and solar developers coming in, and it's much more fluid process, and there's much, much more of them. So instead of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 requests a year, now you're getting 30, 40, 50 requests a year. And it's all of these different facilities. And depending on where they're located, they can drive up huge infrastructure costs. So a single company will put in, I have a land option here, I have a land option here, land option here, land option here. I'm going to bid them all in there. Hey, engineers, you study all of these and figure out which is the cheapest to put in. Now I'm going to take these other 3, 4, 5 of them out and just focus on this one. Well, that drives a whole brand new study because everything's interconnected. So you have these iterative processes going through where we studied it once, developer A says, nope, that's too expensive. I'm not, an extra $1 million in transmission costs is going to break my bank. I'm pulling out. Well, now everybody else said, hey, you're going to get allocated these costs. Do you still want to be a part of this? Like, I don't know, restudy it. So you go through these interconnection queue iterations, and I think the market operators we're in, I don't think they have 2019 figured out. They're still going through the process to go. Oh, no, that's the Southwest Power Pool, and they're backlogged in a lot of different areas as well. But it's as a grid engineer, I can't get past short cycle on any of these. You have to study these. You have to study them in detail. You have to understand what their impact is, especially with the intermittent nature of renewables and where it is. But we just don't have the firepower to do it. It's a long, detailed process. You're coordinating between regional authorities. You're coordinating between all these different utilities and developers and everyone like that. So it's just created this giant, giant backlog that people just keep dumping on and putting on. And it's a very, very valuable, I don't know if commodity is the right word for it, but you call it your queue position. Like, hey, I have a queue position here. I have this project that's been in line for 5 years. Who wants to buy it? Amazon, Google, you guys have these renewable portfolios. Like, what's it worth it to you now? Now you can get in line now and you're going to be waiting 5 years, or you can buy my spot from me and take ownership of this project and what it looks like. So it's created kind of the secondary market of owning these queue positions and what it looks like. But like seeing an article like this, I mean, this is what we've been living with for about 10 years now, really since all the federal subsidies on wind came through. And you saw all the wind farms start to come up and pushing that forward. It just created this machine, and I don't want to say monster because it's a good thing. We want to see this on the grid. We want to see these things put through, but you just applied it to a system that wasn't meant to handle it. It was meant to handle a coal plant or two every year coming online, not 30 to 50 wind farms coming online every year. And we haven't caught up. We just haven't caught up with it in all that time. So it's a lot there. It's a lot there. But
no, I get that, but it's hard to fathom that it's 5 years behind in some places, and that much is there. I just can't imagine that people have put that much investment into some of these projects and not had them come online and be able to start generating revenue.
I was talking to a developer the other day, and they said, I'm getting a lot of heat because they said I haven't executed any of these projects. It's like, I can't, like, I don't have permission to go in. And yeah, it was great. This is a good thing. We had it figured out. We did the study. There's low impact to the grid, all of these other things, but I'm stuck in line with everybody else and they won't let me sneak ahead.
All right. Well, anyways, that's all I had to cover for today. And good show. Lots of good stuff. Appreciate everybody listening in. And anyways, Mike and I will be back on Wednesday next week. We'll be back with Bill tomorrow. We'll hear about the adventures at the polling place. Because I think he was there for like 14, 15 hours yesterday or something like that.
Was he volunteering?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully
Yeah.
he wasn't waiting in line to vote that long.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
He was a volunteer. So I look forward to hearing his amazing stories from there. Anyways, once again, folks, thanks for watching, and we're going to go ahead and cut it for today.